Hello everyone, Ruby Ravel here, a malfunctioning TV set flickering between beautiful fantasies and difficult realities. Here to talk to you today about Venus in Virgo opposite Neptune in Pisces. Astrologically, oppositions are all about finding a way of achieving balance between two dualized polarities. It's an aspect of equalization. If we have been tending to an extreme in favor of one polarity over the other in our life, then the opposition can represent a time where we need to try and bring things into a greater state of homeostasis and equipoise. You know, if we've had too much poured into one jar, it's time to even things out and pour a little bit into the other jar so that they are at the same level. So oppositions really require a period of adjustment and recalibration as we thoroughly assess kind of the elemental dynamic and interplay of our lives and look at areas where we may be a bit too top-heavy and excessive, and others where we may be a bit malnourished and need to embrace an energy that perhaps we have been neglecting or rejecting, or which for whatever reason may not have been available to us. Because of this, I often say that oppositions are astrological aspects of learning to serve two masters, learning to keep very different mindsets and approaches to life in harmony and in balance, of offering obeisance and sacrifice to two gods who ordinarily might seem to cancel each other out because they represent opposite principles in our life. And how we experience the opposition, to me, very much depends on which side of the opposition we've been neglecting or overly favouring, but also how we respond to that call to bring things into balance, how we respond to that call to bring things into a greater state of equality. Sometimes during an opposition, we like the other planet that we happen to be missing and malnourished from. We can get that sense that actually I do miss that planet on the other side of the opposition. It has been out of my life for a while. I felt a bit distanced from it. I felt a bit detached from it. But I can see it over there on the other side of the horizon. And I long to bring a bit more of it back into the world. I can see that it's something that I've been lacking, that I need to attract and achieve greater integration and union with if I want a greater sense of wholeness and fulfillment. However, sometimes that planet on the other side of the opposition can represent something we have very consciously been rejecting and avoiding and trying to avoid having too much with. It may represent a planet that we feel we've had negative experiences with in the past, or may have had to an extreme relationship with in the past. Therefore, we feel a bit traumatized, a bit nervous, a bit cautious around that other planet, and so feel the need to keep a distance from it. So when it appears then on the horizon as this thing that's demanding we embrace it and we accept it, there can be a strong temptation to go, no way, I'm not going down that pathway again, and to run the other way. However, when two planets are in opposition together, they are tied together by an invisible string. And as soon as you start running away from that planet, you look over your shoulder and you find it's fucking chasing you. So there's a sense of the fated and the inescapable there, of having to confront things that need to be confronted to bring things into balance. And if we can accept the fact that we need both planets rather than feeling the need to choose one over the other, I find usually we can make the most of the harmonious potential of the opposition. Whereas if we resist one of the planets, often we end up in situations of either stagnation and stalemate where just nothing seems to move, or we tend to yo-yo between extremes, going from one to the other. And sometimes that yo-yoing between extremes can be important, because through experiencing the intensity of either side of the polarity, we can gradually see the dangers of those extremes and get a feel for what it would be like if we made room for both areas to have kind of equal opportunity and billing in our life. So in the opposition between Venus in Virgo and Neptune in Pisces, we are experiencing the dichotomy between fantasy and reality, between dreaminess and practicality, between fluidity and rigidity, between order and divine disorder, between planning and preparing and mapping everything out down to the last detail versus surrendering all personal willpower and putting things in God's hand and letting things take their own course, like someone throwing themselves into the river rapids and letting those waters carry them where they will without any sense of personal human navigation. So obviously those represent some very significant extremes between two very different worlds, between the world of earthly, physical, mundane, practical matters, and then matters of the spirit, of the deep depths of the heart and the soul, and all of the sublime and terrifying places that it can take us when we embark on that inner and outer watery journey. So to try and elucidate how we might experience this transit, I want to give an example from each planet's perspective. So, for instance, if we've been too top-heavy in Venus and Virgo in our lives, I want to show how we could balance that out with Neptune, and if we've been too Neptunian, I want to show how adding a little bit of Virgoan seasoning can help us achieve greater balance in our lives. Let's start with Venus in Virgo. I often think of Venus in Virgo as being the hermetic heart, the heart of a hermit. In medieval astrology, Venus was considered to be in her fall in Virgo, because Venus is a planet that is usually about relationships, about how we relate to and connect with other people, and also about what it is that we cherish, value, love, and hold dear, and our connection with our ability to find pleasure in this world. And yet many of those things are things that the qualities of Virgo struggle to fully give themselves to. The sign of Virgo is a very solitary, self-contained sign. When we're using the symbolism of the Divine Virgin to express this sign, there's that sense of intactness, of purity, of incorruptibility, of not allowing oneself to be unnecessarily debased or dirtied by too great an involvement with the world. Virgo placements have a strong need to develop themselves for themselves without unnecessary external influences, to be their own person and to have their own hermetically sealed values, as it were. And this makes it difficult for Venus in Virgo to be as amorous or romantic or as kind of touchy-feely and interconnected with people as Venus would ordinarily like. That need to maintain its purity, to keep itself to itself, its reserve, its caution, its fear of taking too many chances or departing from the structures and routines that it builds up to give it a sense of stability and safety in the world, means that Venus in Virgo often struggles to really release itself, to let go, to lower its guard enough to actually share itself with another person emotionally and sometimes physically, because it exists within the critical mindset of Mercury. Very often when Venus in Virgo is contemplating a possible relationship with someone, it does have a tendency to see everything from a negative perspective. It might be looking at a potential partner or lover and think to itself, okay, well, maybe these little bits here and there are workable and practicable, but when I look at those other qualities or the chemistry or dynamics between us, I just can't see it working. And sometimes Venus in Virgo can just see all the possible faults and things that could go wrong if it got involved with another person, that it feels like it would be better off just not taking a chance. If I just stick to myself, to my own life, to my own work patterns, to my own routine, to my own health regimen and exercise regimen, then everything will be okay. At least I know where I stand with myself. I might feel a bit lonely at times. I might feel a bit sad and insecure, but at least I have my sense of self. At least I haven't squandered or debased myself to get someone's love. I have maintained some of my own inner truth, integrity, and purity. But if we have too much earth without any water, then life can start to feel very dry, dull, barren, mundane, routine, and lacking in any kind of moisture or emotional fulfillment or fluidity or spontaneity or dreaminess or magic that could make it feel a little more worthwhile. Sometimes Virgo can be so obsessed with controlling all of the practical and worldly considerations of its life, of being well-behaved and pure and keeping all of its different worldly commitments ticking along in a neat, orderly manner, that there's no room for actual life to creep in, for any beautiful flowers to spark up between the tracks. Venus in Virgo might be sat there thinking, I'm really lonely, I'm feeling emotionally undernourished, I'd really like some deep connection with someone that would make me feel more emotionally, sexually, or physically fulfilled, and yet not actually create any of the space or take any of the chances or leave room for anything spontaneous that might actually give room for a true relationship or connection or experience of pleasure to occur. Everything's been mapped out and structured so thoroughly, there's no space left for the unexpected and divine beauty of romance to appear. So I often find if we have been too Virgoan, then Neptune tries to lure us out of that excessively structured and ordered approach to life. It reminds us that if we want to taste Neptune's celestial delights, we have to let go. We have to be willing to lose control. We have to be willing to surrender some of our purity, some of our self-containment, some of our sense of being a standalone earthly being, and willing to swim in other people's waters, to immerse ourselves in the collective, to immerse ourselves in the other, and to throw ourselves into situations in which we don't know the outcome. Venus in Virgo sometimes wants to know the outcome of everything before it's occurred. It's terrified of taking a risk and failing and being humiliated, of having its vulnerability exposed, of not knowing what will happen next, of not being able to prepare for something because it's unknowable and unfathomable. Neptune possesses that ability sometimes just to throw itself into the waters of life and to surrender to wherever it takes us, trusting that it will ultimately lead us where we need to be. Venus in Virgo can sometimes feel it needs to have mapped out the whole route, whereas Neptune can see a big part on the map with a huge question mark on it and says, well, something truly mysterious and wonderful could happen down that path that could open up whole new sides of my life and experience. Why not go down that way? Even if it's a bit dark and dangerous and potentially nightmarish, wouldn't that still be more exciting than just living a routine, mundane life in which everything is the same from one day to the next? So if we're resisting Neptune in this process of equalization, sometimes Neptune has to go to extreme lengths to pull us out of our self-containment. Some of those methods can be a bit tricksy. If we're just trying to go about our usual work routine, sometimes Neptune can make everything go wrong, or can just throw all kinds of awkward spanners in the works, so we have no choice really other than to go with the flow and improvise and allow ourselves to be derailed and to go on a detour, to go off course. It's almost like any time we try and just stick to our usual rigid approach to things, Neptune goes, oh no, I'm gonna force you to go down the river rapids, even if you're trying to go down the safe path that you've worked a million times. I'm gonna carefully manipulate reality so that you end up going in a different direction where you can actually have some kind of new experience which could potentially emotionally and spiritually open you up to new experiences that could be important for you during the next part of the cycle. Sometimes it's a bit more subtle. Sometimes we just feel those Neptunian energies coming back in. Instead of feeling meticulous and structured and detailed or detail-oriented and shrewd, instead we feel a bit more peaceful, a bit more relaxed, a bit more serene, a bit more dreamy, a bit more inclined to notice some of the potential sparkle and magic and enchantment with something. It's almost like we're walking down a path that we go down every day, and suddenly, as happens in many a fairy tale, we notice a little glimmer of golden shining butterflies asking us to go off path, to go in a different direction, to seek out the fantastical and deranged instead of just always sticking to our usual purviews. And we find that if we do this, if we do allow more of that spaciness and dreaminess and mysticality to come into our life, to be a bit more loose and flexible and porous to the unknown and strange, that we can end up feeling more fulfilled and balanced and not so dry and arid and lonely and self-contained. We become receptive to what the collective and what the universe could give us if we allow ourselves to go off track. But if we stubbornly refuse to go beyond the rigid earthy boundaries that we've set for ourselves, then that's when it gets unpleasant. That's when Neptune really feels the need to pull out the big guns to make us bring more wateriness into our life. For many people, that can end up manifesting as illness or sickness, because it becomes almost impossible just to rigidly go about our usual day-to-day routines if we are too physically well to do them. Sometimes it sends a Neptunian person into our life so that that imbalance can be corrected through an external persona. Sometimes that could be a Neptunian person who is sick, ailing, needy, or going through some big meltdown in our life which demands that we go along and provide them with our Virgoan structure and sense of needing to serve and support others. Other times it can represent perhaps a Neptunian love interest. You know, while we're there being practical and pragmatic and shrewd and well-behaved, we notice someone who seems to be a bit more magical, a bit more strange, a bit more away with the fairies, or who may even, have a bit of a wild, narcotic, debauched lifestyle. And precisely because they are living out everything that we are not living within ourselves, they have a bit of magic to them. We may feel a desire to unite with them, to be closer to them, so that they can be and contain what it is that we are lacking. And through that relationship, learn to have a greater connection with the Neptune within ourselves. Now let's look at the other side of the scenario about what this equalization process might look like if someone has been living too Neptunian an existence and needs a bit more of some of the disciplined, self-contained and independent ethos of Venus in Virgo to make its experience of life more refined and balanced. So Neptunian people can span a huge gamut of different ways they can express themselves. Neptune is a planet that is not of this world, that wants to draw us away from this world, away from the world of the physical and the limited and everything that is weighed down by gravity, and instead take us into the mystical strangeness of the other world. And the reason we all need Neptune is because Neptune can be deeply healing, but Neptune can make us sick at the same time. The fact is, life can be too heavy sometimes. It can be too harsh. It can be too difficult. It can be too strenuous and laborious and painful and lonely. And when Neptune asks us to escape from the world and to withdraw into our spiritual lives, into our fantasies, in our dreams, to rest and sleep and become a bit more unconscious, it's like when anesthetic or a painkiller has been administered. Some of the harshness and the heaviness and the boundaryness of life loses its sharp pang and becomes a bit more soft and blurred around the edges. It's like when you've had a really hard or difficult day where you are feeling very sad and in a lot of pain. And if you go home and you watch a movie that you find just so moving and magical and enchanting and immersive, you can get so pulled into the storyline shown to you in that film or in the book that you are reading, or which is conveyed by the imagery of the piece of music that you're listening to, that for a moment you are taken away from the cares of your life and offered some of the healing and spaciousness of being able to temporarily exist in a different reality to this one. That's a very important thing to be able to do. It's what people try and seek when they are meditating, to give life more spaciousness and serenity, to feel more detached and distanced from the immediate stresses of our life. But it's also what people are trying to do when they end up becoming addicted to alcohol or drugs, where the inability to cope or face reality as it is means that we just say, I'm going to have nothing to do with reality at all, and just throw myself into the nebulous, immersive chaos of the other world, where we can relinquish all attachments to our ego, all attachments to our self-responsibility and accountability, and instead allow ourselves to be controlled by the drugs or the alcohol or whatever things we are dependent upon. Even spirituality at its most extreme can be at danger of manifesting itself in this way, where we think that we can be nourished so completely by, the love of God, by all the pleasures of the other world, that we neglect our physical needs. We stop eating, we stop cleaning, we stop taking care of ourselves, we stop paying the bills. So all of those things taken in moderation can be very necessary for nurturing and watering our spirit, but taken to extremes, they can send us to the madhouse, which Neptune also represents. So when I think about the need to balance Neptunian qualities with Virgoan qualities, I think of a Sufi adage that I really love, which says, pray to Allah, but remember to tie up your camel. And it's basically expressing the ethos that, yes, by all means, put your trust in a higher power, put your trust in the divine, pray to God, chant, meditate, and do all of those things that make you hope for the best, that God will intervene and take care of you and do the things you want. But also don't be a dumbass. Have some fucking common sense. Don't expect to leave the doors wide open for terrible things not to happen. It's saying, yes, pay attention to God, but also pay attention to the little details in your life which you cannot always trust to take care of yourselves. Sometimes you have to be the one who is the mature adult who takes care of them. And as I said before, with Venus and Virgo, sometimes Venus and Virgo can be so monopolized, so obsessed with the maintenance and the looking after of all of those little details, that it loses its connection with that bigger picture. It loses its connection with the divine. It's so busy tying up its camel that it forgets about its connection with something more spiritual and magical and rapturous, in the face of which having a camel may seem rather petty and important. But equally, if someone becomes too Neptunian and they just devote themselves totally to those mysterious higher powers, they forget to tie up their camel and then wonder why someone's stolen their camel, and then end up in that victimized headspace of going, oh, why does everything bad happen to me? I'm such a good, pure spiritual person, and I just get exploited by the world, because they're lacking some sensible Virgo and practicality, cynicism and distrust. Remembering that sometimes the only person you can depend upon to look after yourself is you. Even if God loves you, sometimes the best way you can express the love of God is by loving yourself and taking care of your fucking life and not expecting someone else to do it for you. So there is that need with someone who's been too Neptunian often to find a way of taking control back of their life, if they've been allowing themselves to be monopolized by deep, difficult emotions like we experience during depression or melancholia or other negative headspaces, and to use the painful experience of those emotions as an excuse for not taking responsibility for themselves. They could do with a bit more of that Virgoan influence that says, no, I will take care of myself, I will look after myself, and whatever difficulties I am facing, I will use that shrewd, mercurial, problem-solving mindset to ask myself what little details I can incorporate into my life, what little routines can I build up, which will gradually over time make my life feel more structured and manageable. How can I be resourceful and sensible? So that Venus in Virgo then can really offer the excessively Neptunian person a lifeline or an anchor if they have been playing the victim game, if they have been playing the overly unhealthy, indulgent, addict game. Then Venus in Virgo can be the thing that says, okay, no, you need to get your life in order. You know, you need to get a job, you need to find a source of income, you need to start taking better care of your health, you need to develop a healthy sleep pattern, you need to start paying attention to all of these earthly, ordinary, everyday things, which may on the surface of it seem to be lacking in that Neptunian glamour and magic, but which, if you invite them into your life, can actually give you so much sense of strength, integrity, self-containment, and self-reliance that can really give your earth a solid foundation in which those Neptunian waters can be kept in. See, with extremely Neptunian people, there can often be that horror of earth, because earth feels so heavy and restrictive and boring and dull, and it's worried that if it does give in to those earthy needs to control everything and keep everything in order, that it'll be shutting some of that magic out. When actually, if the two are properly integrated, when we leave room in our life for both the practical and the spiritual, for the sublime and the mundane, for the wild and uproary and the sensible and mature, the two can support one another. You know, if Neptune is this well of enchantment, then Virgo can be the stone wall you build around the well so that you don't fall into it every time you get fucking drunk. You know, it offers you a safety net which a too Neptunian person might decide to completely forsake, because even the idea of a safety net might be separating them from that infinity of the Godhead that they want to feel in communion with. So yeah, like I said, that Venus in Virgo may come as a real lifeline. However, that doesn't mean it will necessarily be experienced pleasantly. You know, for some people, if they have been too Neptunian, that Virgoan need to get their life in order to achieve more balance might seem very harsh. It might seem very judgmental, it might seem very critical, it might seem very cold and unwelcoming. And yet, if they do listen to the teachings and the earthly wisdom that it's offering them, which can help balance out its spiritual wisdom, they can ultimately lead a much more balanced and grounded life. And so sometimes that might be expressed in the form of a Venus in Virgo person, which could, yes, like I said, be someone who's quite cold and critical and who just seems to tear our lives to pieces and to just point out all the little wrong things we're doing. But it could also represent the very kind and compassionate side of Venus in Virgo. Even though Venus in Virgo is so self-contained, it's also willing to go the extra mile for the people that it really cares about. If it loves someone and sees them suffering and can see a practical thing that it could do or teach them that would improve the quality of their life, the Venus in Virgo person is often willing to drop everything to help that other person get themselves up on their feet patiently and slowly talking them through every last little thing that they could do to make their lives more balanced than they presently are. So the Neptunian person might be tempted to experience the Venus in Virgo person as the saviour, as the one who is pulling them out of the strange, mysterious waters in which they are thrashing and drowning, and who actually helps them to not only find dry land, but also to have a more positive relationship with it. Sometimes it might manifest as more obvious physical limitations that let us know that we need to get our shit in gear. Neptunian people can often be insensible with money, and because of their debauched, extreme lifestyles can also, be prone to sickness. So sometimes, again, that sickness might be a sign that, oh, actually, I need to start taking better care of myself if I don't want to die. Or it could be a job that gets foisted upon us which forces us to be more practical and responsible than we've had been. Or, if, that side has been neglected and we find ourselves in a financial difficulty, then that might be a time when someone wises up and goes, okay, I can't just keep throwing money around and acting crazily and debauched and going on big, spending sprees or riotous nights out all the time. I need to cut costs and start living more within my means. So yeah, those are some different examples of how these two signs can help to balance each other out, but the little signs that might appear to us in our life that tell us we need a bit more of one rather than the other. And though some of those signs can sometimes be very painful and unwelcome, sometimes these oppositions, if we really listen to them, can be times of great unity and fulfillment, where if we've had too much of one thing, we can start to feel our life evened out, especially if that comes in the form of a beautiful relationship that helps us to achieve that greater sense of balance and integration. It's one of the awkward things of making forecasts to do with oppositions is that they can be aspects of separation, but they can also be aspects of union. They can be aspects where we have to move away from or separate from certain parts of our life, but it can also be ones in which we attain that balance through achieving new connections with other people. And yeah, that's how it goes. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking there. I hope you've enjoyed this video and you find it useful. I think for me, I've mostly experienced this aspect as a need for more Neptune in my life, even though I come across as a very Neptunian person to other people of seeming like this mysterious or magical or ethereal witch woman, and these are words people actually call me as, not just ones I'm ascribing to myself. My day-to-day life is pretty disciplined and rigid and mundane, or at least has been for much of this year. And I think during this transit so far, I've already experienced some of that need to let go, to go with the unpredictable, to allow life to be a bit more messy and unexpected, because great things can happen sometimes when you're not just playing it safe and sticking within the fenced-off areas that you have marked out for yourself as the sensible course. Neptune teaches us the need to sometimes be divine, to be intoxicated, to be ridiculous, to be nonsensical, to just throw ourselves into the ocean and sometimes actually find Atlantis instead of drowning. You never know sometimes with Neptune whether your dreams are actually going to be fulfilled or if you're going to have your dreams exposed as illusions that deeply disappoint you and grieve you. It can go both ways, and very often during the course of a transit it can go both ways. So there we are. If you'd like to get in contact with me personally, you can message me at thestarsunraveled@outlook.com. You can follow me on Instagram at astrologyandunderwear, and you can support me on Patreon at www.patreon.com/thestarsunraveled.